The emperor came for tea and was served in a beggar's bowl, and it was the greatest lesson of his life. Everything in his presence seemed to hold its breath. The gravel in the garden was raked into perfect waves. Every leaf on the bonsai cherry tree looked as if it had been polished by hand, and the generals and advisors standing behind Emperor Kaelen were as still as jade statues. Kaelen was a man for whom perfection was not a goal, but the very air he breathed. He had executed an architect for a single misaligned tile and exiled a poet for a rhyme that struck him as insufficiently smooth. And now he was here, in the secluded home of a legendary tea master, to witness the pinnacle of aesthetic order. The master, an old man in a simple gray robe, moved with a slow, deliberate grace. He walked past shelves lined with flawless porcelain cups and bowls carved from a single piece of moon-white jade. The emperor's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. And then the old man chose it. The bowl was crude, asymmetrical, made of dark, rough-hewn clay. Its ugliness was crowned by a scar, a deep crack that had been mended with a glittering seam of gold, like a grotesque vein. The air in the room grew cold. The first general's hand went to his own sword. This was not mere negligence. This was a public, deliberate insult thrown in the face of the Son of Heaven. The emperor faced a choice. He could, with a single nod, have his guards drag the old man away and level this garden for his insolence. That would be simple. But Kaelen saw the master's eyes. There was no fear in them, only a calm, profound sadness. And so, the emperor chose another path. He would play the old man's game. He would accept this ugliness, only to crush it with scorn, to prove publicly that nothing great could ever be born from a flaw. "I accept your gift, master," he said, his voice as cold as steel. With an icy, courteous smile, Emperor Kaelen extended his hands. The master filled the bowl, and the steam that rose from it seemed to Kaelen like a poisonous vapor. He brought the vessel to his face. He expected the smell of dust, of cheap clay, something sour. But what met him was an aroma that made him pause, the scent of damp earth after a rain, of wood smoke, and of distant mountain blossoms. His mask of perfect composure flickered. He glanced at the frozen faces of his court. They were waiting. Waiting for the annihilating remark, the witty cruelty that would grind this old man into dust. The emperor brought the bowl to his lips, preparing to spit the tea onto the ground and declare it a bitter poison fit for this hideous vessel. He took a small, contemptuous sip, and his world collapsed. It was not merely tea. It was a poem. First, a slight bitterness, like a memory of sorrow, which then gave way to a deep, enveloping sweetness, like wisdom earned, leaving an aftertaste of smoke and earth that spoke of eternity itself. He sat there, unable to utter a sound. He, the great emperor, the arbiter of all that was fine and beautiful, was disarmed and defeated by a sip of tea from a beggar's bowl. The witty retort died on his lips. His attempt to humiliate the master had backfired, leaving him looking like a fool in front of his entire court. His world, where form defined substance, was shattered. He saw the silent question in his general's eyes, the confusion in his advisors. In that moment, he was not the Son of Heaven. He was a man who could not recognize a treasure because it came in a dirty wrapper. To hide his shame and confusion, he gave a sharp command, "Leave us." When the rustle of silk robes had faded into the distance, the emperor fixed his gaze upon the old man. The mask was gone. Only cold, wounded pride remained. "What is the meaning of this?" His voice was quiet, but it rang with menace. "Did you mean to humiliate me?" The master slowly shook his head. He picked up another bowl, a perfect one of white porcelain, and set it beside the scarred one. "Your Majesty," he said calmly, "tell me, which of these bowls has a story?" The emperor was silent, unsure of the old man's trick. "This white bowl is flawless," the master continued. "It is empty, it has seen nothing and endured nothing. But this one—" He gently touched the golden seam on the dark clay. "This bowl was once a masterpiece. It was created by the greatest potter of his age and gifted to your grandfather, who then gave it to my ancestor as a sign of eternal friendship. It was perfect." He paused, and then the great earthquake came. The workshop was destroyed, and the bowl was shattered into 7 pieces. My father collected everyone. He did not throw them away as a symbol of failure. For months, he painstakingly pieced them together with resin and mended the cracks with pure gold. The truth struck the emperor like a physical blow. This was not an insult. This was the highest form of honor. The master had not offered him an ugly vessel. He had offered him the shared history of their dynasties, a symbol of resilience and rebirth from the ruins. And he, in his blind arrogance, had seen only dirt. He had been ready to execute a man for an act of loyalty he had been too proud to see. It was his lowest, most crushing fall. Emperor Kaelen stared at the golden seams, and they no longer seemed ugly. They had become a map. In those winding, golden rivers, he suddenly saw a map of his own empire. This large scar was the bloody rebellion in the south that he had crushed. This thin web of lines was the conspiracy he had uncovered at the last moment, and this rough patch, crudely filled with gold, that was his greatest general, Vorin, whom he had exiled for losing a single battle, ignoring the 100 he had won. His entire life, he had hunted for perfection, and all he had found was emptiness. He had cast aside anything that was broken, scratched, or imperfect. He had surrounded himself with smooth, empty vessels and disposed of anyone who bore scars. But it was in the scars that the history was written. In them was the resilience. In them was the wisdom paid for with pain. He raised his eyes to the master. For the first time in his life, the Son of Heaven bowed his head, not as a ruler to a subject, but as a student to a teacher. "I will take it," he said quietly, and it was not a command. It was a request. He returned to the palace a different man. His first decree was not to build a new, perfect pagoda, but to recall General Vorin and all the wise advisors he had exiled for their mistakes. That evening, and for all the evenings of his life, the emperor drank his tea from only one bowl. He would hold its rough, imperfect sides in his hands and trace the golden scars with his finger, for he had learned that scars are not something to be hidden. They are the lines that show the world where strength has healed.